I'm Judy Murray. Behind every champion is a driving force.
Victoria at her best.
Wanting to prove people wrong was something that was a very powerful driving force in me.
We all got prepared for how to perform, but no one prepared us for what will happen after.
If you can see it, you can believe it, and you can believe that that could be you.
We knew that we was a part of something bigger.
More glory for Sarah's story.
If you don't stop doing this, you may go deaf.
It was everybody else that almost had to suffer because of what I did.
Stunning stuff from Pendleton.
Becky, I think you need a sports psychologist. And I was like, why? What's wrong with me?
I was a little bit scared when he first told us. I knew that there was a massive responsibility.
The undisputed lightweight champion of the world.
It's going to be an historic second goal. Kelly Holmes for Great Britain.
I didn't know about a breakdown, becoming a self-harmer, being depressed. Had no idea what that meant.
If you tell me I can't do something, I will go out of my way to prove you wrong.
I've always known that Victoria always liked something that has a bit of risk involved with it.
We were all very good cyclists, but Victoria just had something else. She had that stillness to her body, but her legs could just go so lightning quick.
One of the most wonderful phone calls of my life. She says, "Dad, I'm world champion." And it was sort of that moment. 10 out of 10.
Over that 4-year period between 2008 and 2012, there were about 1 million more people on the road cycling, and many of them were women. And I think that Victoria had a massive hand in that. And she had stardust, she had quality.
An elite coach who she fully respected the opinion of said to her, "You'll never be the queen, you'll always be a princess." And then when I discovered that and turfed it out, she became the queen.
Victoria Pendleton Cbe, former Olympic and world champion turned jockey, one of the bravest and most impressive women that I've ever met. And I'd like to go back to see who and what led you to become Britain's most successful ever sprint cyclist.
I feel quite overwhelmed, really. It's just, to call me brave, especially. Something I've never really considered myself. And my introduction to sport was through my father, who was a very keen cyclist, and it was inevitable, really, that one day I would start racing a bike. I got my first racing licence in 1989, 9 years of age. My twin brother and I quite often had races created especially for us because there weren't kids of our age group racing at track events.
We both cycled from a very early age. All three of us did, so it was my older sister Nicola, Victoria and I, all encouraged to cycle, as that was my dad's hobby.
It was something I thought everybody did. It wasn't until I was a bit older that I thought, oh, not everyone has a sporting sort of interest at home or parents that would lead you or encourage you into sport. It was more of a hobby, just for fun, and also to earn a little bit of pocket money. It was better than a paper round anyway. Less commitment, better return.
So you could earn money at a young age from cycle races?
Yes, like just even a couple of quid here for winning that, or a £5 for winning that, but it was a much more than I could win doing a paper round.
And your dad was a champion cyclist, so is that where your competitive instinct comes from?
Watching my dad race being one of my earliest memories, I was also very aware of how tenacious he was as a human being. So I grew up learning that my dad was kind of quite well respected, but quite an aggressive rider. And people would roll their eyes and be like, oh, Max is here. And I kind of admired that in him a little bit because I was like, oh, I want people to think, oh no, Victoria's here.
She's the third generation cyclist. My parents were cyclists. When we had Victoria, my wife and I were cyclists. You're expected to be a cyclist and carry on.
You know, the way that he kind of encouraged me over the years sometimes was a little bit character building, shall we say. That was one of his favourite phrases, character building. I've recounted this many times before, but watching my dad cycle away into the distance, not being able to keep up, and him not looking back to see where I am, and me feeling quite hurt by it in many ways, like he doesn't love me anymore, which is crazy because I know he always loved me, but it felt at the time like I needed to earn it. It was sometimes a tough lesson and difficult to sort of understand and appreciate as a kid, feeling very much that my dad's appreciation of me was very much based on my physical performance that I could deliver on the bike. He was very hard if I didn't race, for example. Sometimes he wouldn't want to speak to me, which made me feel very, very guilty.
The trouble is I was so flipping fit at the time. And one of the things we used to do, and I still do actually, is when somebody's really struggling, you just ride back and you push them. One hand on their back, one hand on your handlebars, and pedal and push them up the hill.
It was very much a pushy parent scenario with the practice, with the training, 60-mile bike rides on a Sunday morning, arguments with Dad as to whether we wanted to go out or not.
Something my dad made me very, very aware of growing up was you have to give it your best, and then no one can ask any more of you than that. So as long as you give everything your very, very best, you can't look back and think, what if I just tried for 5 seconds more, or if I could have just pushed for another mile more.
She went into school one day, having been asked what she'd done at the weekend. She was 10 at the time, and she said, I've been out cycling with my dad, and the teacher said, how far? And she said 50 miles, and the teacher says, do you mean 15 miles? And she says, no, 50 miles. And yes, perhaps I did expect a little of them.
Luckily, my mum was the other end of the balance. My mum is a very sweet, kind, thoughtful, non-competitive individual who'd always say things along the lines of, we love you no matter what, you can only do your best, you can only do what you can do, and was always very, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. But I kind of felt like I had to do it. It was something that I was destined to do.
As a mum, I didn't really pay a lot of attention to how she rode. I didn't recognise that she had a good style, that she was fast. In fact, I wasn't very happy about them racing at all. I personally would not have had them racing at 7, 9, or whatever it was that they started.
We were all very good cyclists, but Victoria just had something else. She had that, I don't know what it was, she had, like the stillness to her body, but her legs could just go so lightning quick.
I think Victoria continued to cycle after the Alex and Nicola gave up because she did want to please her dad.
Tell me about the impact that your twin brother Alex, his illness, had on you and on the whole family.
Our GP had diagnosed the leukemia through a checkup after he was basically scratched by a rose thorn and developed septicemia. So he was rushed into hospital and then later into Great Ormond Street Hospital. I was moved on to my grandparents' house for them to look after me while Mum and Dad went and stayed with him. At 4, you don't really understand what cancer is, but I knew it was very, very serious. It was strange times, but I'm very lucky and very grateful that he was in remission fairly quickly after a combination of radio and chemotherapy. And we got to start school the following year together. But I always felt very protective of him and very responsible to look after him. I think it made me quite a serious child growing up because I felt that he needed someone to keep an eye out for him. If he was even getting picked on at school, I'd feel like I'd have to say something about it to go and look after him.
Your dad said that he thought that some of your competitive instinct may have come from that period where the focus of parents and grandparents all went on to your brother to help him through the illness, and that you were always vying for attention, and he wondered if that's where some of your competitive instincts started.
It's interesting that Dad says that, because I always felt very very worried and very responsible, and it made me a very cautious individual. It wasn't like I was an attention-seeking child, quite the opposite. I was quite quiet and happy with my own company. But it definitely brought a seriousness, and I wanted to grow up and quicker in terms of the mentality and how I approach things. Because I saw vulnerability in being a child. Yeah, I wouldn't say it was much fun as a kid, but I think I was quite serious as a consequence.
And he recovered, and you went on to race against him, which, talk me through the sibling rivalry of that, because you were better than him, weren't you?
It was strange, because being twins, we went from being very evenly matched to me suddenly becoming taller, stronger, faster than him. About 14 or so, my dad said he really could see me progressing and being more competitive than my brother on the track. My brother wasn't interested in training to race with the men, whereas I knew it was my only option.
At no point through your childhood did you have any dreams or ambitions of being Olympic champion?
Definitely not. I wanted to be good at it. I wanted to win some races. What I really wanted to do, I wanted to be a vet. But I knew very early on, because I wasn't particularly academic, I wasn't going to make the grades. My career advisor was like, it's just not going to happen.
But you also played hockey, didn't you?
Yes. So I used to enjoy lots of other sports. I mean, at school, I tried to participate in as many different sports as possible. If there was a team, I wanted to be on it. If not, I wanted to be captain of it. And sport was the one thing at school that I excelled in. And I think because of my background and the fact that the family spent so much time cycling, I was quite fit and strong. I knew that I had more opportunity in cycling to be successful than I did as one person, as a part of a team. And then around that time, at 16, I was talent spotted. So it was a telephone call out of the blue. I was at home, and Marshall Thomas had rung me up, and he was assistant national track coach in Manchester, and said, oh, we've seen some of your results. And I was like, okay. And he was like, we'd like you to come to Manchester and trial for the GB squad. We'll do some tests and see if you have the physical ability. And I was like, Dad, there's a man on the phone who says I should go to Manchester, and I've handed him the phone to speak to Marshall.
As you do when you're 16.
Yeah. This is a weird conversation that I didn't expect.
Marshall was the perfect coach for Victoria. He gave her sufficient encouragement, but not so that she got sloppy and thought, I can easily do it. He was the ideal person at the ideal time to talk to her.
At no point had I ever considered it to be my full-time job. There were no female cyclists I was aware of in my generation. I was forced to watch the Tour de France every year, religiously. There were no women in that, for sure. I had very little understanding of what was available on the female cycling scene, so it was never something that I even thought women could do full-time.
So you decided to go to university and study sports science?
Yes. From 16 onwards, I'd been to Manchester, I'd done some tests in some labs, and I said I really wanted to get my GCSEs done, I want to do my A-levels, and I want to go to university, because I can't even in my mind imagine what a career in cycling could be. And it seems a very risky idea.
Many people don't realise that you can sacrifice so much of your life going after an Olympic medal. And during that period of time, you don't have an opportunity to earn money. That's a big factor in the decision-making as to whether I'm going to dedicate the next 4 years of an Olympic cycle to go after a goal or a dream.
A lot of people think that maybe if you're an Olympic athlete, then you're going to be earning money. Well, you don't get paid for an Olympic gold medal. You don't get paid to train for one. For me, going into cycling as a full-time career was not, I'm going to make any money out of this. I'm going to just about scrape through to survive, hopefully, and maybe one day I might get some success and feel some sense of achievement in what I do. But at no stage did I ever think, this is going to earn me a living.
Marshall Thomas spots you. He gives you the opportunity to go to the cycling HQ in Manchester, where you have training options, but you decide you're going to go to university to study sports science. He provides you with a training program, and you pretty much have to deliver that yourself while you're studying.
I definitely didn't feel ready at 16. I mean, this is a career option that was presented to me from Marshall Thomas that I thought wasn't even possible. I actually went to the same university that he went to. He would send me training, and then I would be left to try and fulfil the training as much as I could and fill out a training diary, but in my own time by myself. It gave me time to develop and to strengthen, and the strength and conditioning was a big part of the training. And I was quite a late developer physically, so I think it gave me time for my body to become a little bit more robust to the training. It was a very lonely process, and it was very self-driven. Marshall was the first man other than my dad to ever say that I was good at cycling. And I thought maybe cycling is the chance that I've been given to really prove myself that I can be great at something, I can excel. I didn't have a dream to become a cyclist. Most of the time it's pretty uncomfortable and monotonous. Cycling is mostly grueling and suffering.
So was it always in your mind that when you finish your degree, that's where you would go? You would go to Manchester and you would embrace this cycling programme and train to become a full-time athlete?
Well, I'd spent time between university and Manchester travelling and keeping my eye in, keeping myself present at the velodrome. They knew that I had an interest in pursuing a sprint career there. Women didn't become track sprinters. I don't think we'd ever really even qualified any women internationally to compete. I was told that I could probably get a 2-1 or qualify for the Commonwealth Games in Manchester, and I really wanted to do both. So at university, I was just fully focused on those two things being done. Get a 2-1, train as much as possible, qualify for the GB elite squad. The day I'd finished university, I moved to Manchester and didn't even do my graduation because I was at the European Championships. It was full on from that moment. All I wanted to do is to be good at something. I wanted to be respected for being a master of something. You know, when I was talent spotted by Marshall and the training programs came my way, my dad took a big step back because he knew it was above and beyond his ability and capability to train me. It wasn't until that moment that I really felt his sense of pride in me, because he was like, wow, you've made it on the first rung of the ladder.
One of Victoria's problems was that she didn't have the confidence in herself that I had in her and Marshall had in her. And that's a pity.
Tell me about Marshall, because without him, you may well have ended up in agricultural college and spent your life working with animals.
Marshall probably doesn't even realise what a massive influence he was in directing my life into elite sport. He is not what I would regard as a typical elite coach. He was very reassuring, he was very encouraging. He always made sure that the training was manageable for me, and he'd talk me through it and I'd have to give him feedback. And he never applied sort of undue pressure because he knew I was conscientious enough to do what I was told. He actually treated me like an adult, which was quite unusual. He probably understood that pushing me wouldn't help either. He knew that I would do it to the best of my ability and not give him any back chat.
How did you feel then when British Cycling decided that the coaching environment in Manchester was not going to be sufficient to get you to where they thought your potential could lead you to, and they suggested that you go to Switzerland to train at this new World Elite Cycling Centre? What did that make you feel like, having to leave Marshall and everything that was secure about your environment?
I understood that there wasn't the coaching expertise present in the UK. The team of cyclists in the sprint squad were already more successful than we'd ever been in Britain before. So finding the right coaching staff was going to be tough, and it was the best option to send us to this international training centre in Switzerland. And I actually thought it was an amazing opportunity.
But it turned out to be very different from what you'd had. How did you cope with that?
It was very regimented, it was very disciplined. We all very much stuck to a very strict regime, even to a point where we had to go for a little lie down after lunch in the salle de repos. Yeah, it was forced. It was enforced. It was a big transition from the freedom I'd been afforded beforehand to a typical coaching kind of structured sports centre.
And a coach, a change of coach with a very different style of coaching to what you were used to.
A very different style. Frédéric Magnier was a very successful French track cyclist, and for me, you know, I was very impressed by his resume, by his palmares. It was an honour to be coached by him. So very much kind of adapt to the environment, but it was a very, very different environment. I'm very good at taking instructions, and I don't mind being told what to do. I really don't mind being given a plan and sticking to it. It was tough. It was tough to try and earn someone's respect. Fred is very much more of a traditional coach. It's his way or the highway. And if you were compliant and kept your head down, it was the path of least resistance, it was a good thing. And I was desperate to earn Fred's respect. I want to learn as much as possible and really make the most of this opportunity, which I saw as a gift. It didn't take long for me to realise that I was definitely not one of Fred's favourites. I felt that nothing I ever did was really ever good enough, or it was always disappointing. He was always quite dismissive and disappointed, and I was really eager to feel some reassurance from him. But that really isn't his style.
Frédéric was, I think, 3 times world champion himself. So it wasn't as though you could brush him off as being somebody that's a coach that's got to be in his bonnet. Frédéric got from the riders that were there a string of world champions.
I did some extra core stability work, and I did some extra rollers as well in the morning, because I was so fatigued to wake myself up before the first training session, because my body was so tired, and this is a new volume of work and a lot more than I'd ever done before. I got in so much trouble. It was like, Victoria, in my office. And I was like, oh, I've never been called into an office in my life, not at school, never. And he said that I was disrespectful to the programme, that I didn't respect him and his coaching. I was devastated. I kind of felt that I was always walking on eggshells around him because I was trying to do something proactive. Well, I learned very quickly that it's not a positive thing to use your own brain in that environment. It was very much be quiet, do what you're told, keep your head down.
So did you feel at that point that you were being programmed, manipulated even?
Fred definitely had his favourites, and he definitely had some people that were not his favourites, and he would definitely take an opportunity to almost humiliate you in front of your teammates sometimes when you did something badly, or make an example of you, which was devastating. You know, for a mistake in a training exercise, or incorrect timing, or, you know, being a minute late, just like trying to embarrass you in front of everybody, send you home.
Were you able to have that conversation with him?
I definitely would never have dared to have that conversation with him. On a bad day, he's absolutely terrifying. He's, you know, you could see the rage building in him and this expression on his face, and I was genuinely, you know, he made me feel very uncomfortable.
So would you say that you were afraid of him?
I think I was afraid of him. I was desperately trying to please him and terrified of him at the same time. I kind of wanted to find a middle ground where we could see each other as adults. It never happened.
It sounds like he's not seeing you as a person. He's just seeing you as somebody to train.
Yeah.
Almost like you're a piece of machinery.
It's hard because, you know, when you consider yourself a hard-working individual, and that, you know, you're not someone who cuts corners or turns up late or take a shortcut on the road ride. I would never do that, never, because that's the way I am. And for someone not to see what you bring to training at all or trust it, it does make you feel quite vulnerable, because you're like, it doesn't matter. You know, I wasn't confident in my ability, but I was confident in my mentality, but then that was taken away as well, because it's like, well, that's not important because we don't trust you, because you can't be trusted.
That's what he was supposed to be doing. OK, the ways to achieve the ends might have been challenged at times, but overall, that was the object of the game, was to build world champions. Regardless, yes, these methods did work.
Were there other female riders that you form a friendship group with?
A lot of people were struggling with the format of the training there. It was so exhausting and you were so drained that everyone just kind of kept themselves, I think, in order to survive. I definitely did.
Were you lonely then?
I mean, I was lucky enough that I could speak to my mum and dad quite a lot. You know, there were people I was friends with there, and I was very glad to have my teammate Ross there as well, who, you know, we got on really well. If I hadn't have had Ross there, I think I would have really, really struggled, especially because there was a language barrier between yourself and most of the other individuals there too.
I always said to Victoria, you're in a position where you can represent the country, you can ride world championships. At least you'll never be in the position that I was in, of looking back and thinking, what could have happened if only I'd... So I think Victoria might have been pressured, very heavily pressured, she was. But at the same time, she was still producing the goods.
But she never mentioned how she was really feeling. I think I found out more by reading her book. I felt very sad that, you know, she resorted to self-harm, that she couldn't open up to us.
Did it make you a much better cyclist? Did it give you the tools to go on to become what you eventually became?
It was a very big learning experience. It taught me that I could endure a lot more than I thought I could. But it had made me very vulnerable because I felt that I was disappointing everybody and that I hadn't necessarily reached the potential that everyone was hoping for.
Is that because there just wasn't praise and encouragement?
There was very, very limited praise and encouragement. I'd definitely become a shell of my former self there. I doubted my ability, despite having some of the best results in my career to date. You're being treated like a child again. And it was like, well, you know, I have been to university and I have got a degree in sport and exercise science. I'm not a complete idiot here. You don't need to be aggressive and hard with me. I've kind of proved that I've got here on my own merit through my own personal commitment to training and racing. And it was hard. It was really hard to suddenly to go backwards, really, to feel like all that kind of mental development that you've had and growth as a human being is suddenly just removed.
You decide to leave this kind of toxic environment. You come back to Manchester, you get involved in the British cycling setup there. You're sharing a flat with Chris Hoy, and you're preparing for your first Olympic Games in Athens. It doesn't go so well for you in Athens, and Fred is there.
For me, Athens was very much an opportunity for me to see what performing at the Olympic Games would be like. I'd finished 4th in the world, so there was a chance I could scrape a medal, but it didn't quite work out for me. I went out in the first round. I know other people had higher expectations, and Fred was perhaps one of them. I saw him on the concourse, and he sort of grabbed me by the forearm and sort of laid into me about, you know, it's my fault, I shouldn't have left Switzerland, that I let him down, I let myself down, I let my country down. He was really angry and I was in floods of tears. He basically just blamed me and my choices to be why it went wrong and I messed up, and yeah, it hurt a lot.
Sounds like kind of the response of a bully.
I'd never experienced anything quite like that before. Definitely not from a man in authority had ever kind of berated me like that.
Is that something that now, much further down the line, you can look back on and think, I should have reported that?
It was definitely felt like I'd been bullied. And yeah, looking back, it would would never stand for that. It would be ridiculous.
A number of female cyclists have come out and spoken about the culture of sexism and bullying that exists within your sport. So what has to change for that culture to be eradicated?
Looking back now on my career, two of very influential individuals in my coaching have been dismissed through bullying and aggression. So in some ways, it's taken a long while for this to come about, but what I was talking about and what I experienced and what I tried to voice back in the early days, which I was made to feel like I was emotional, neurotic, difficult, irrational female, was very justified. And I think that's partly due to the fact that those individuals were employed without having the necessary coaching and qualification themselves to perform in that role. So many athletes have not had the opportunity to fulfill their own potential because someone like that has come along and crashed into their lives and destroyed their dreams.
I hear this from so many athletes in different sports. There's that fear of reporting something and rocking the boat, and the possible result of that being that you get dropped from a programme or your sponsorship stops or doors are closed to you. Did you ever feel that?
I took it out on me, not looking for the source of the kind of discomfort. It was more like, I'm not dealing with this very well, I'm not cut out for this, I'm not good enough, I'm not hard enough, maybe they're right about me. Maybe I am too emotional, maybe I am not going to be a champion, that's it. If I was the best in the world at this, then maybe people would start respecting my opinion. After the disappointment of Athens, the experience of Switzerland, that meeting with Fred and the way he made me feel, I was very lucky at that same point to be introduced to Steve Peters.
The first time we met was in Switzerland. I was flown out to meet her. She was in a training camp. She was very disturbed, very upset, destroyed, didn't feel she could go on. That's why I was taken out there. They felt that she had amazing talent, which clearly she does have, but she didn't believe that anymore, and she just couldn't go on. So she wanted someone really just to give her some TLC and listen to her, which is all I did. I didn't do anything other than that.
Steve gave me an ultimatum, really. It was like, well, you either go forward and do this or you don't, stop cycling. And I wasn't willing to accept the second option. It wasn't even an option for me.
The start of it was of seeing a young woman who was just completely destroyed by what I felt was the system and the background that she'd come to that system from. It was just a very disturbing picture.
Wanting to prove people wrong was something that was a very powerful driving force in me. If you say I can't do it, it makes me want to do it more.
I think probably the most critical factors for me when I meet people is to get inside their head and see what they're going through and what they've been through and what their beliefs are now and expectations and so on. So you really understand them. And I think that's what I brought to the party. And I think that, for me, probably was a turning point where Vicky was able to start to believe in herself and start thinking somebody here actually understands me and can move forward. I think that was a critical point.
I'd met Steve briefly once in Switzerland. He came out to meet me, and it was an incredible turning point in my life. It's difficult to explain when you meet someone who has so much compassion right in front of you. You've never really met that before. It was quite overwhelming. And I think I cried for about 2 hours. He told me exactly what kind of human being I was, which was humiliating.
He helped Victoria a lot, kind of put things into perspective in terms of taking some of the pressure off of herself. I think us all as children put a lot of pressure on ourselves to keep people happy.
I think it gave her a lot more confidence to deal with her own issues. Any issues. He's one clever cookie who seems to be able to get to the point when the point is not obvious.
He read me like an open book. He talked to me as a human being on the same level and gave me an incredible amount of confidence to move forward. I couldn't have achieved what I've achieved in my career as a whole without, like, Steve Peters is like a shining light in a lot of very, very bad coaching. I felt like a huge letdown until I met Steve. yeah, he picked me up. Entirely changed the course of my life. I love him dearly, to a point it'll make me emotional even thinking about it.
The time that she phoned me, it was to understand what this young woman was going through and to say, just spill it out and tell me what's in your head at this point, and to get her back off the floor and say, look, be inspired, because, you know, you've got so much to offer the world, because she felt she had nothing at that point. There was nothing left. And I felt that wasn't right at all. I did not believe that. And so I shared with her what my thoughts were, and then we discussed this. And that started bringing her back from this terrible place where she'd just lost completely herself as a person and what she'd achieved and who she was.
Did Steve offer to stay with you through that next 4-year cycle to 2008 to Beijing? To help you to make the decision to stay within the sport?
If Steve hadn't have been there, I can honestly say I wouldn't have continued for another Olympic cycle. He gave me that confidence in myself that I had the tools to make it through.
At some point in her career, which we were chatting away, and I was thinking, what is it that's stopping her from being the queen of the track? And what she said was she went for an assessment, and an elite coach who she fully respected the opinion of said to her, you will never be the queen, you'll always be a princess. And then when I discovered that and turfed it out, she became the queen.
Steve's input clearly propelled you to what became this glittering career, because in 2005 you won your first World Championships, the first of 9.
I think it was in Los Angeles, and she phoned us probably about 5 o'clock in the morning and woke us up in bed to tell us that she'd won a gold medal. I mean, we were absolutely delighted.
I had one of the most wonderful phone calls of my life, because we didn't know that she'd won at the time. And she says, Dad, I'm world champion. And it was sort of that moment. 10 out of 10.
Let's go to the 2008 Olympics in Beijing and that first gold medal.
Oh, it's a really strange feeling, like pure relief. I think everything that you put into it, all the training, all the years, all the sacrifice, for me it was pure relief. In many ways, I think for me it was like, done, tick, move on. As I said, my motivation was quite negative. I want to prove you wrong.
Was the feeling of relief linked to expectation and pressure from the public, from the media, from everybody who'd supported you? Was it linked to your fear of failure?
You know, you want to do it to say thank you to all the people that have helped you and supported you, and for your family and friends who have always been there, to everyone who has told you you can't do it, you want to prove them wrong. And then you want to do it for yourself, for all the hard work and effort that you've put in, all the physical suffering you've gone through to get there. Not all of it is necessarily elation.
Which of your Olympic medals gave you the most satisfaction?
Well, the gold medal, obviously, would be the most significant in the keirin. Mainly, I was told that I would never make a good keirin rider because I wasn't strong enough. So I spent a lot of time in the preparation to London 2012 trying to sprint longer, further, on bigger gears so that I could attack every race a bit like Chris Hoy does. So take the lead, dictate the race, dictate the pace of it, and fight off any potential attacks. I made a point of attacking earlier than anyone would think I would in every single race, but ensuring that I had the speed and ability to stay there.
Over that 4-year period between 2008 and 2012, there were about 1 million more people on the road cycling, and many of them were women. And I think that Victoria had a massive hand in that. And she had stardust, she had quality, and she, again, went back into those communities and made sure that people understood not just what she'd achieved, but the potential for others to do exactly the same.
when she got a gold medal, absolutely incredible. So proud, crying, screaming, everything. You know, the support at the London 2012 in the velodrome was absolutely incredible.
So what does it feel like? You're lining up in an Olympic final, all those years of preparation going into it, and the pin drop moment. What sort of turmoil, inner turmoil, are you going through?
Well, it's really amazing how many people think elite sports people just don't get nervous. I think you just do a much better job of concealing your nerves. The stakes get higher and the consequences get bigger. Having adrenaline and being in the moment and being ready to fight or flight is an essential part of being the best version of an athlete that you can be. So you kind of don't look at it badly, you just think, yeah, it's my body getting ready to say, let's go. So you start welcoming these feelings.
Did you have any doubts at all about taking on another 4-year cycle and going for gold in London 2012, or was a home Olympics a massive driving force for you?
The opportunity to perform on home turf at that level is so unlikely in your lifetime, so unlikely, that you just had to give it a go. It's a huge blessing and a huge curse in equal quantities. A blessing because you know that it would mean so much to the nation, and a curse because the expectation and pressure is just so extremely high and there's no avoiding it. Like every billboard, every advertisement, it was always there, it was always there. And that was really difficult to manage at times. There were times where, you know, you're in turmoil, thinking when you're halfway between 2 Olympic cycles. And I remember Sir Steve Redgrave talking about that moment where you're 2 years in and, you know, the last Olympics is a dot on the horizon behind you and the next one is a dot on the horizon in front of you and you're in like a no man's land.
Is it also a big opportunity for you to grow your profile and give you a chance to bring some income in through sponsorship? You're doing it for the pursuit of a goal or a dream or a challenge, and often there is no financial gain, and when it's all over, you're having to literally start again.
The coverage that you see of women's sport is tiny. If you think about, of all sports people in the UK, 40% are women, yet the media coverage of women's sport is about 4%. So again, a massive disconnect. And I think it's a huge opportunity for brands because it's an area which is uncluttered because there aren't a lot of brands in this space. It's an area, if you really look at getting behind and championing female sport and female up-and-coming sports heroes, you get in early, and you're also saying something about your brand as well.
I was in a very lucky and fortunate position that there were sponsorship opportunities, more than I'd ever imagined in my life, that could exist, and people around you are married and settled and have kids and mortgages and savings and pensions and all these things, and you've just been riding around in circles really fast. That's all you've been doing for very, very little prize money.
In the run-up to London 2012, at what point did you decide that you were going to retire after that? Or was that decision in any way forced upon you?
I was very aware and made very aware that there was some young female talent coming through. It was always highlighted that they were going faster than I was and that they were going to supersede me very shortly. Kind of was reminded almost on a daily basis that my time was coming to an end. They were being encouraged to beat me because that's what they wanted. They wanted them to be better than me. So what they do is they play down my performance and play up theirs. It got to that point, you know, when you think, if we get really nasty to somebody, maybe they'll just disappear and we won't have to get rid of them or fire them.
We'll make it so uncomfortable that they'll just disappear.
That they'll just go, and that was fundamentally what happened. I was like, I can't live like this anymore, to be perfectly honest. I want to be surrounded by positive people who make me feel good about myself. Managing certain personalities at work was what really broke me. It was a struggle walking into the velodrome with my head up and my shoulders back most days, knowing that there was individuals there vying for me to be replaced as soon as possible. I felt like I'd been made to feel so unwelcome there that I had no other option than to leave.
Knowing what it meant to her and that she was planning on retiring after 2012, it was even more moving to watch her know that she succeeded in what, you know, she would have been absolutely gutted if she hadn't have got a gold medal in any of her races. If she'd even got a silver, I think she would have been miffed.
When you've retired, to suddenly go from what's been a very structured and disciplined training environment, routine every single day, 6 days a week for 10 years, you've sacrificed your life to becoming a champion cyclist, and suddenly it's not there anymore. Is it difficult? Is it easy?
I was heartbroken. Quite honestly, going from being successful at something and not really knowing how to even function as a normal human being, having the freedom that you've always wished for and not knowing what to do with it. I didn't feel physically ready to stop being an athlete, and I still want to do more. I still feel I've got more to give, but just unfortunately not in that environment.
Literally within 12 months, 13 months of walking away from cycling, you're in the Gold Cup at Cheltenham.
I'd gone from never riding a horse to being approached to become a jockey in 12.5 months. I fell in love instantly with this sport that I've never come into contact with. It was a revelation under the coaching of Yogi Breisner and various other men. It just goes to show what you can be capable if you're given the right environment and the right support.
And the right people.
And the right people.
And so much of what you will have learned from the discipline of being a pro cyclist would be quite easily transferred into the discipline of learning how to be a jockey.
Well, apparently I'm very coachable, which is good.
Who
'cause
knew?
I must have learned something along the way. Yeah, and also just having a focus. And I don't mind speed too much either. I don't feel done, and I still feel there's so much more out there. And in some ways, I now appreciate what a resilient individual I am. I was always portrayed as someone weak and emotional and not big enough, not strong enough, need to act more like a man. But actually, I'm pretty robust, and I will give most things a really good go.
What things need to change in order for there to be more queens of the track in British cycling?
We need head coaches to be women, performance directors to be women. There needs to be, I think, more authority and more support as female roles within teams. And not because the way that men do it is wrong. There needs to be an equal balance of input to an athlete, male and female. I succeeded despite bad coaching. So many people fall by the wayside, not because they have a lack of talent or drive or determination, just because they've been misunderstood. And I think if you treat the individuals like they want to be there, then surely that would give an amount of respect both ways.
So there's no chance of you becoming the next performance director of British cycling anytime soon?
Well, I did actually say to Dave Brailsford on one occasion that I'd have his seat one day. I don't think it's somewhere I'd be comfortable or accepted. Maybe grassroots level would be more my scene. I'd love to help and support young athletes, especially young female athletes, because I've got a feeling I might know what they need.
You certainly are not finished yet. Victoria Pendleton, thank you so much for joining me on The Driving Force. You are a trailblazer in British women's cycling. You are brave, strong, inspiring, impressive, and thank you for speaking out and sharing so much of your story, which I'm sure will be the most enormous inspiration to any young female athletes who are listening. Thank you.